Good morning, students. In today's class, we're going to discuss the major poets of the Victorian age and the three poets prescribed in your syllabus: Robert Browning, Alfred Tennyson, and Matthew Arnold. Then we are going to talk a little about dramatic monologue. In my previous classes, I have given you the characteristics of the Victorian age. I have talked about the literary movements of the age, and we have talked about the age in general as it was an age of conflict between science and religion. Now let us begin with the major Victorian poet, that is Robert Browning, from 1812 to 1889. Victorian poet Robert Browning, considered the master of dramatic monologue, was born in Camberwell, England in 1812. Browning's father was a well-paid clerk for the Bank of England, while his mother Sarah was an accomplished pianist. Browning was mostly self-taught and utilized his father's huge library, which contained more than 6,000 books. At the age of 16, he attended the University College in London, but a year later he grew dissatisfied and left him to pursue learning at his own pace. Browning started writing poetry at the age of 12. In 1833, Browning anonymously published his first major published work, Pollen, and in 1940 he published Sordello. On encouragement of the actor William McArdre, Browning tried writing for the stage, but did not prove successful. However, writing for the stage helped him develop this form of the dramatic monologue, a literary form in which a character, addressing a silent audience at a critical moment, reveals his own character. Browning's most famous works are his dramatic lyrics, containing his popular poems My Last Duchess and Porphyria's Lovers in 1842, dramatic romances containing The Lost Leader and The Laboratory 1845, dramatic personae containing Caliban upon Statibos and Rabbi Ben Ezra 1864, and Men and Women containing Fra Lippo Lippi and The Last Ride Together in 1855. The Ring and the Book, written in 1868, is considered to be Browning's most celebrated achievement that established his popularity. It is a verse novel that is based on a sensational Roman murder trial in 1698. It is centered on Pompilia, a beautiful young woman who is so unhappy in her marriage to Count Francini, an older and cruel nobleman, that she prevails upon a young priest to help her return to her parents' home. The court finds them, has Pompilia sent to a convent, and banishes the priest. When Pompilia returns to her parents, the Count arranges for the assassination of Pompilia and her parents. The Count is arrested, tried, and executed. Browning's influences grew during the late 60s and 70s and finally led to the founding of the Browning Society in 1881. He was awarded honorary degrees by Oxford University in 1882 and the University of Edinburgh in 1884. Browning died in Venice on 12 December 1889. The second poet that we have for discussion is Alfred Lord Tennyson, 1809 to 1892. English poet Alfred Tennyson was born in Somber Bay, England in 1809. He was the fourth of 12 children of a clergyman, George, and his wife, Elizabeth Tennyson. Tennyson's father had the family history of mental illness. Tennyson briefly studied at Louth Grammar School and later joined Trinity College, Cambridge. It was at Cambridge that he developed an intense friendship with Arthur Hallam. Tennyson and Hallam were part of a literary group called the Apostles. This group provided Tennyson the confidence he needed as a young poet. Tennyson's first collection of poetry, poems chiefly lyrical, was published in 1830. This was followed by a second volume called The Poems in 1832. This volume received unfavorable reviews, though his friend Hallam continued to promote it. Hallam's sudden death in 1833 jolted Tennyson, and he began writing In Memoriam, an elegy for his lost friend. Besides being his closest friend, Hallam was engaged to his sister Emily Tennyson. Tennyson did not publish anything for 10 years since Hallam's death. The most important works of Tennyson includes In Memoriam. Tennyson's poem In Memoriam is an elegiac tribute to his friend Arthur Henry Hallam, who died in 1833 at the age of 22. The poem was written over the course of 17 years and was finally published in 1850. In Memoriam is a mammoth work that includes 133 poems, including the prologue and the epilogue. The poem shows Tennyson's battling with the issues of mortality, trying to come to terms with his friend's death and gradually accepting it. The poem concludes with an epilogue and epithalamion on the occasion of the wedding of Tennyson's sister Cecilia in 1842. The other prominent work of Tennyson's are Maud and Other Poems, which included two of his favorite public utterances, Ode on the Death of the Duke of Wellington and Charge of the Light Brigade in 1855, Idyllics of the King in 1859, and the plays Queen Mary 1875, Harold 1876, and Becket in 1879. Tennyson died in England on 6 October 1892 and was buried in Westminster Abbey. The third poet that we have for discussion is Matthew Arnold from 1822 to 1888. British poet and critic Matthew Arnold was born at Leham on the Thames in London in 1822. He was the son of Thomas Arnold, the famous headmaster of Rugby School who was celebrated in the novel Tom Brown's School Days. His mother, Mary Arnold, was the daughter of an Anglican clergyman. As a child, Arnold attended the Reverend John Buckle's school. Later, he studied at Rugby School and Balliol College, Oxford. After completing his graduation at Oxford, he returned to the Rugby School and worked as a teacher of classics. Arnold was appointed as private secretary to the Lord Lansdowne in 1847. Lansdowne helped in securing an inspectorship of schools in 1851. This new position provided him with a measure of financial security and enabled him to marry Fanny Louis, the daughter of a judge. His first book was of poetry, The Strident Reveller and Other Poems, was published anonymously in 1849. This was followed by Empedocles on Etna 1852, Poems 1853, which established his reputation as a poet. In 1857, Arnold was appointed as Professor of Poetry at Oxford and served this position for 2 consecutive terms of 5 years. He was the first professor to deliver lectures in English instead of Latin. Arnold's career as a literary critic began in the late 60s. He published his lectures on translating Homer in 1861, followed by last works on translating Homer in 1862, essays on criticism in 1865, and culture and anarchy in 1869. Arnold died on 15th April 1888 at the age of 65 in Liverpool, England. The important works of Arnold are Rugby Chapel, Dover Beach, The Scarlet Gypsy, Tyresses, Sohrab, and Rustum. Now let us take the last, that is the dramatic monologue. Renowned critic M.H. Abrahams defined 3 main characteristics of dramatic monologue. A single person who is clearly not the poet utters the speech that makes up the whole of the poem in a specific situation at a critical moment. This person addresses and interacts with one or more people, but we come to know about the audience presence only from clues in the discourse of the single speaker. The main purpose behind the poet's lyric is to reveal the speaker's temperament and character. The dramatic monologue as a poetic form achieved its first distinction in the works of Robert Browning. Browning's poems My Last Duchess and Porphyria's Lover are considered to be the best models for this form. In the poem My Last Duchess, the Duke is negotiating with an emissary for a second wife. Even though it is the Duke who is talking about the character of his last wife, the Duchess to the messenger, one can derive lots of facts about his own character through the manner in which he speaks and the way in which he describes his wife. He is revealed to be an emotionally cold, calculating, materialistic, and haughty man. In another poem, Porphyria's Lover, the speaker describes the act of murdering the women he loved. During the course of explaining his reasons for the crime, the speaker reveals himself to be a jealous, possessive, and psychotic lover. According to David Dyches, Browning's dramatic monologues are written to project with an almost quizzical violence a certain kind of personality, a certain temperament, a way of looking at life, even a moment of history, realized in the self-revelation of a type. They are set pieces in which a fully known character is set sharply before the reader. So students, in this class, we have discussed about the 3 major poets prescribed in your syllabus, namely Robert Browning, Alfred Tennyson, and Matthew Arnold. And we have taken in detail about what is dramatic monologue and how does it fit into the poems of Robert Browning. So this much for the class today. Tomorrow's class we are going to discuss the characteristics of the modern age. Thank you.